Okay, here we go. Chapter 11, Fads and Crazes. Now, if you're wondering why the chapters will now be out of sync, it's because, as you'll see when we get into Chapter 11, at the end of it, they apply emergent norm theory to an example. So that's why we're looking at Chapter 11 now. Now, as I stated in the very first class in the introduction, the vast majority of collective behavior that occurs is not harmful in any way at all. And fads and crazes are an example of this. They're not violent or destructive or harmful. And I'm going to refer to fads and crazes more than once throughout the course, but I'm going to look at both specifically now and go into more depth regarding both, but fads especially. Fads and crazes are not the same thing. It may appear like they are, and people tend to use these words interchangeably, but there's a very important difference between them, and this involves money, the expectation of profit. With a craze, people purchase or invest in something they know little or nothing about simply because they believe the item's resale value is going to increase dramatically in the near future. So a craze is driven by the fear of missing out, and this is different from a fad. A fad occurs when large numbers of people get really excited about embracing some pattern of behavior for a short period and then they quickly drop it. So this is similar to a craze in behavior, but it's the motivation for participating that's really different. With a craze, there's an expectation of financial gain at some point, and with a fad, there isn't. People simply want something because everybody else wants it. Whether this is participating in an activity or having a belief or getting a product or participating in a fashion trend or amusement or behavior. So when you look at fads and crazes, for some people, they may treat something as a fad, and other people may treat the exact same thing as a craze. For example, a toy. If somebody wants a toy like a Tickle Me Elmo because everybody else wants it and they want to play with it, then they're participating in it motivated as a fad. If somebody really wants a Tickle Me Elmo because they want to put it away and keep it and try to sell it in 20 years, marking the price up, then it's the same thing, but they're participating in it as a craze. Looking at crazes first, we have quite a few examples of them. Pokemon cards were first distributed in 1996, and they're not just cards to have, they're a trading card game. Each card has a name, a type, and an amount of health points. So cards can be purchased in pre-constructed decks. Promotional cards are included with some packs. And then you have booster boxes of 36 packs or individual packs. And you can also buy cards individually through websites and individual sellers online. Some Pokemon cards are considered rare, and because of this, their value is different. And collectors will use protective casings for rare cards in order to preserve them. The most expensive Pokemon card ever sold was the Pikachu Illustrator card, and it sold for $233,000 on Zen Market on July 3rd, 2020. Yes, you are hearing me correctly. So I would say that these are something that began as a fad. Kids wanted them to play with them. But you had some people approach it like a craze, expecting to make money in the future from certain cards. Pogs actually started out from milk bottle caps, believe it or not, and they originated in Japan. It was in the early 1990s that the game of Pogs, as we know it, came to be. Pogs, as we know them, came from a brand of juice popular in Hawaii made with passion fruit, orange, and guava, POG, Pogs. And they were essentially just cardboard discs with images on them of anything and everything from popular culture. So movie and TV, toys, sports, maybe people or places or logos, brands, fast food joints, among others. Now there are some super rare and unique Pogs. The Jurassic Park Pogs 6 hologram Pog, that's a mouthful, with Slammer, with artwork from the original movie are worth $1 million. And again, you heard that correctly. In 1997, Taco Bell teamed up with Nintendo for a cross promotion for the Nintendo 64, and they gave away pogs at their locations. If you collected pogs that added up to 64, then you could exchange them for a prize at the restaurant, like get something free off the menu. But if you decided to keep them and have the Mario score 64 pog, it's worth about 250 bucks, and the Star Fox score 60 pog is worth about 650 bucks. So again, it isn't just that people wanted these things like kids to play with them. It's a craze that they collected, feeling at some point they'd be worth a lot of money. Very few were, but some were. Another example of a craze is Beanie Babies. These were small stuffed animals made by Ty Warner, which is now called Ty Incorporated. And they were originally launched in 1993, but they didn't really catch on until 1995. And they're called Beanie Babies because they're stuck with these little plastic bean type things. So they're not actually beans, they're a plastic shaped like a bean. And they were deliberately understuffed so that they could be posed, which was different than other stuffed toys. Now, part of the value of a Beanie Baby, according to collectors, is its tags. They have two tags for identification. A heart-shaped tag that you can see that's attached to the ear, and this is called a swing tag at the top, and a fabric tush tag at the bottom. So the tag at the ear is made out of this light cardboard, and the tag at their little bum, their tush, is made out of fabric. Every Beanie Baby has these two tags, and they have to remain attached and in absolutely perfect condition. In fact, plastic coverings would be sold in the exact shape of the tags to protect them in their original condition. And the tags had a few functions. So with the tush tag, this is a picture of them. First, the tags help distinguish between a real Beanie Baby and a knockoff, a substitute, a fake one. And they also helped to kind of create the perception that the Beanie Baby was much more valuable because the tags helped make every Beanie Baby unique. Because on the heart tag, so first of all, with the tush tag, as you can see here, depending on when the Beanie Baby is produced, is going to have a different kind of tush tag. With the heart-shaped tags attached to their ear, there would be the Beanie Baby's name and their birth date, which made them seem more appealing, and it would drive up the desire to have one produced. So early on, there would also be a poem on the tag, just a short 4-line poem. And again, all of this helped to create a feeling of kind of a personal connection with consumers. And it made them seem like they were more than just a stuffed animal, that there was something special about them. And there were a very wide variety of Beanie Babies, which meant that there were some that would appeal to everybody. No matter who you were, you could find a Beanie Baby that would have something that you would like about it. So there were hundreds of different kinds of Beanie Babies, which appealed to everybody, and it also made it more of a challenge for serious collectors to collect every one that there was. These were such a wildly popular craze that it became a $6 billion industry when it was still popular. At one time on eBay, 10% of their sales were Beanie Babies. And I'm going to keep referring to this specifically as a craze because these were never really completely approached by consumers as a toy, like a toy fad. These were always pretty much from the get-go purchased with the idea that they would be worth something. During the height of Beanie Baby's success, a Beanie Baby-centric publication was issued. One of the largest was Mary Beth's Beanbag World, and this was a monthly magazine dedicated to Beanie Babies and competing toys, plush toys. This magazine ran from 1997 to 2001. Now, part of the reason Beanie Babies became such a wildly popular craze is that they were not too expensive to buy, so this was something everybody could compete in. A Beanie Baby would usually cost you anywhere from $9 to $20 at the high end, which really still isn't much even then. So financially speaking, they were accessible to everybody. And the way they were marketed to the public was very specific and very intentional. So by that, I mean the company specifically tried to create demand. They did this because in several ways. So at the beginning, you could only buy Beanie Babies in smaller stores, not in chain stores like Walmart or Sears. Only smaller specialty shops and gift shops would sell them. And this contributed to the feeling that they were unique, that they were special, that these weren't just available everywhere. And even once they spread to larger retail outlets, the company would only ship them in limited numbers, which again contributed to this feeling of being unique. Starting in 1996, as I said, the tags included 4-line poems related to the Beanie Baby and a date of birth for the toy. So this also was perceived to increase the uniqueness of them and made them more desirable. Ty Incorporated would also periodically retire production of different models of Beanie Babies. So what this did was this led buyers to believe that they absolutely must get that model when it was available, or they would miss out. So this motivated them to, again, feel like the value of the retired Beanie Babies would rise dramatically in price as time went on because they were no longer available. Now, to be fair, this did occur with some of the earlier models that were retired, but then consumers assumed that all retired models would rise in price in the same way. And something else that Ty Incorporated did was that some Beanie Babies would be labeled a limited production model, meaning that only a certain number of them would be produced. They wouldn't be mass produced like the others. So consumers, again, knew they wouldn't be around to buy forever, and everybody who wanted one wouldn't necessarily get one, which caused a spike in demand for certain models. And this also created the impression that at some point in the future, these limited production Beanie Babies would be especially valuable. So far combined, the company's strategy was to deliberately create scarcity by not making them available everywhere, producing each new design only in limited quantity, not enough to meet consumer demand, and restricting individual store shipments to limited numbers of each design. So this ended up all combined helping to create a huge secondary market for the toys that buyers were quite aware of. So in other words, this really contributed to perceiving Beanie Babies as being a valuable collectible, one that consumers would be able to at least recoup their money from, and then some. In addition, the company used a marketing tactic that you might not expect. They decided to actually limit advertising so that there was no overwhelming, constantly in your face marketing in place in terms of commercials and print ads. Because remember, this is before the internet was really common. And this was done on purpose with the intent that it would create kind of like a sense of the unknown so that consumers would not have specific information they could rely on when it came to deciding which Beanie Babies they bought and which ones they didn't. Collectors were never provided concrete information about what would be coming up. So they didn't have a lot of notice regarding when a model would be retired, or how many of each model would be produced, or how the models would be distributed to stores, which created stress and prompted consumers to want to always act quickly and never wait. So what I mean is when they had the opportunity to buy a Beanie Baby, they would act on it. They wouldn't put it off. And this is pretty different, isn't it? Instead of having commercials running constantly and ads in all the magazines. And Beanie Babies did in fact become a very sought after toy and a sought after collectible. Because these are two things. Again, a sought after toy is a fad and a sought after collectible is a craze. thinking there's going to be a profit in the future. For a few years, these were extremely popular. But for all those people who collected Beanie Babies as much as they could, not as a toy, but with the idea that at some point in the future they would be able to make something from their investment, for the vast majority, 99.9%, they didn't make any money at all. Instead, there are many, many people who have Rubbermaid containers in their attic or their basement or their closet full of them. Part of the problem is that the only people interested in buying Beanie Babies are other collectors. Nobody else is interested. And 99.9% of them have not gone up in price as much as originally expected. Very, very few people have yet to make a ton of money, much less any money from Beanie Babies, and it doesn't look like they ever will. Now, there are certainly some that are considered valuable, but the reason these are worth more is usually because of a mistake in production. So this is Peanut. It's a dark blue elephant that's so popular because the color was an accident. It was supposed to be much lighter. So only about 500 of the royal blue version were made. And as a result, these Beanie Babies go for about 1,500 with an original tag. This is Curly, and Curly is so valuable because his tush tag is a mistake. He has another Beanie Babies tush tag. So this little Beanie Baby is worth about $45,000. This is Scoop. I guess he's a pelican. It's kind of hard to tell because he's crushed in this little plastic case. His tag's blank. Scoop. He has no name, no date of birth. Poor Scoop. He's worth about $100,000. Now, this is Pinchers. And there's nothing wrong with Pinchers, but because he's one of the original 9 and he was retired really early on, he's worth about $35,000. And this is the Princess Bear. This was dedicated to Princess Diana, and this was made in very, very limited numbers. So this Princess Bear is worth about $665,000. Wow. But again, the vast majority of people just have these sitting somewhere in their house, hoping that someday they're going to increase in price. A craze is clearly an example of collective behavior that can occur in person, as well as psychologically when people are not together. So psychologically it occurs because people are watching commercials, they're seeing advertisements. Now, with the internet, they're joining online groups to chat about the product and mill about together and think about it and try to gain information about it. It happens in person as well, as people wait in line to get into a store when a new model is released or a new shipment has arrived, when they attend conventions, anytime they're physically together for this reason. So a craze is similar to a fad, and that's probably why the words are often used interchangeably. But again, the important difference is this aspect of money, the expectation of profit. A fad is something different, and I'm going to talk to you right now about fads. Fads occur when large numbers of people enthusiastically embrace something and then quickly drop it. So they're not expecting to make money at all. They don't expect something financially, they simply want to participate. Fads tend to come in really quick, be absolutely everywhere, and then they just disappear. They fade from popularity, although this length of time will vary. And sometimes a fad will enjoy a resurgence every few decades. Clothing is a great example of that. The resurgence of bell bottoms or neon clothing or girls wearing ankle boots. Skateboarding seems to come and go every 20 years or so. So once a fad disappears, it could come back again. It's not necessarily gone forever. And fads can be loosely categorized into different kinds, some of which will probably surprise you because you just haven't thought about them in that way. And please note also that sometimes different kinds of fads will overlap with other kinds, which I'll talk about. So, for example, belief fads. You probably never thought that there would be fads in belief. This is not typically what comes to mind when you think of a fad, but it is. There are, in fact, fads regarding what people believe in, like flying saucers. This really took off in the 1950s um, when this man uh, said that he saw a flying saucer. Now, a belief in aliens. These days, to hear that somebody might believe there's UFOs out in space or talk about life on other planets, this is not uncommon because we've all had lots of TV shows, lots of movies about this. It really has become part of our popular culture. But this idea has not always been around, and we can actually pinpoint the day it started. It really began June 24th, 1947, when Kenneth Arnold became the first person to say he saw a UFO. He was a businessman and a pilot, and he said that while he was flying around the Mount Rainier area of Washington, he saw a series of bright flashes of light, or what he thought were bright flashes of light, but then he realized it was a line of objects that were reflecting light back to him. Some were crescent shaped, others were more circular and disc shaped, and it's because of this particular description that the term flying saucer emerged. This is where the term flying saucer originated. Now, after his sighting, which was very widely publicized, it was followed by literally hundreds of sightings across the United States within the next few years. Um, so his sighting occurred in June 1947. And for example, it was that summer that a rancher said he found unusual debris, including metallic rods and chunks of plastic, and scraps of unusual paper in one of his pastures in New Mexico. And soldiers from the nearby Roswell Army Air Force Base retrieved this debris, and newspapers reported that they had, and this was reported as an alien crash site. Now, it was actually a top secret high altitude balloon carrying equipment to detect Soviet nuclear tests. But this is the beginning of the whole Roswell, New Mexico alien crash site. After his UFO sighting, Arnold became kind of a minor celebrity of sorts, and for about a decade afterward. So he was somewhat involved in interviewing other UFO witnesses and contactees, which means people who claim to actually have contact with beings from outer space. He wrote a book and several magazine articles about his UFO sighting and his subsequent research. And Mr. Arnold's sighting started two kinds of fads. Again, the first being a belief in aliens and life in outer space. Whether you thought that was little green men or aliens trying to take over the earth, or just, aliens traveling around checking things out, a belief in life in outer space became prominent for a short period of time. The second kind of fad was a kind of alien fad with movies and TV and comic books and toys within popular culture. So this was a fad regarding beliefs, which then caused a fad in popular culture. Fads and belief often tie in with something like health or politics. For example, for several years, it was believed by some people that vaccinations could cause autism, and some people still believe that. How did this begin? Because in 1998, an article was published in a medical journal called The Lancet by a British surgeon named Andrew Wakefield. And in this article, according to his research, he said that the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine caused intestinal inflammation, entrance into the bloodstream of proteins harmful to the brain, and consequent development of autism. And I want to be very clear that at the time this article was published, this was the only thing suggesting this link. But pretty quickly, the bandwagon effect took over. The bandwagon effect is an occurrence where the rate of uptake of beliefs, ideas, fads, and trends increases with respect to the proportion of others who have already done so. So, what am I saying? As more people come to believe in something, Others also hop on the bandwagon, regardless of the underlying evidence. Why do they do this? It's kind of hard to say. Maybe they just have a desire to conform to other people. Maybe they have a tendency to follow what other people say. Maybe they get information from others rather than obtaining independent information themselves. But the increasing popularity of the belief encourages more people to get on the bandwagon too. This is what occurred regarding the belief that a vaccine can cause autism. And this was encouraged by the fact that Jenny McCarthy, who was a celebrity who worked on American television in various capacities, stated publicly that her son had developed autism as the result of a vaccine, and then did everything she could to promote this belief. Now, she did this truly believing she was doing the right thing. She was certainly not acting maliciously or for some kind of personal gain. She wrote books, made public appearances, went on talk shows. She contributed to articles and popular publications, which really helped to encourage belief in Dr. Wakefield's research. She really is considered the public face of the anti-vaxxer movement in the US. So this was the beginning of the soundly disproved belief that vaccines cause autism. And even though the paper has been 100% completely discredited, he has been found guilty of scientific misconduct, ethical violations. It has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt that he misrepresented data, as well as undisclosed financial misconduct. Thousands of people still jumped on the bandwagon and embraced the belief that this vaccination can cause autism in some children. Mr. Wakefield even lost his medical license. He has been permanently suspended from acting as a doctor, and The Lancet retracted the article. There have since been several other major studies conducted that have not found a single link between any vaccine and autism. Yet, as I said, even to date, thousands of people believe that this can be harmful. And this has evolved, or at least contributed, into an anti-vaxxer movement regarding beliefs about vaccines. Miss McCarthy herself has even said she's not anti-vaccine. Her issue is with the schedule vaccines are supposed to be administered. So the vaccine autism link belief is a fairly recent example of a belief fad, also known as a medical bandwagon, identified as, again, the overwhelming acceptance of unproven but popular ideas.